And say the pledge of allegiance for the meeting started. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for showing up on this Tuesday night. Those that did, some of them aren't here. All right. First up is the consent agenda. Guess everybody had time to read over minutes, benches, resignations.
Dr. Rios, do you want to briefly mention why the alternative school handbook's back in consent for us, please?
Yes, be glad to. Had a situation where sometimes we have chronologically advanced students, age more than grade, and they're trying to regain either their status or credits, and they get to the point where they may not have had the whole 7 semesters that's required of students typically attending here at the high school. And so because of that, we're asking that we can look at that, discuss it, and maybe waive that 7 semester requirement if they have earned their credits. The alt school has 2 less credits than regular high school. If they've got to that position, then instead of making them come just for seat time, go ahead and letting them graduate and be done. So it doesn't hurt our attendance, and then that also gives them an opportunity to go out and find a job, or if they want to start, going to training or secondary level education of some sort, they can do that. And we did not have that in there before, so that's the reason we're redoing.
The local compliance plan for special education is an annual mandated compliance plan that the board needs to approve each year. So that's why that's in there. Takes the signature of the board president, myself, and then Dr. Lincoln as well.
Everybody need to pull anything out, revisit it, or?
We approve the consent agenda as presented.
A second. Okay. Is there any more discussion?
I'd like to quickly discuss the Fine Arts Program review specifically, and I see a band director here. I don't know if we have choir or anyone else from theater. I guess my main issue or main concern is facilities for those. I know we failed the bond recently, but to sit in a theater production in the black box is a little depressing. I don't know, with the exception of running another bond, I don't know if anything can be done, but I would just like to stress the need for adequate facilities for the different fine arts programs.
We talked about stage in the gymnasium, trying to find some way to do something better. You're right, you go to the black box, it's not easy.
Well, there's nowhere.
It's not easy to get anything out of it.
Concert performances, and the gym isn't really a good fit, neither is the cafeteria.
Yeah, we definitely have issues. From the stage to seating to everything. We talked and looked at different bleachers.
In Monet's, there's their new FEMA building and then an auditorium also. But haven't we looked at, can't really put a FEMA building here because of the population. Right?
I think that is correct.
Based on the housing, and you need to be more centralized.
That's what Robbie's
Yeah.
all about.
Unless things have changed. I mean, we haven't built a lot of new housing around here, but we probably need to make sure that we continually stay on that, make sure their guidelines
You
are the same.
probably wouldn't even be able to count any of the housing in here, very few. Now, if you were over by Robinson, that area,
Robinson's the only building that qualified last
you
time.
get all of that population in those, the housing plus all of the students, staff in the building.
Is that something that would fit band and stuff like that, that we could, you know,
Well,
even though it's not here at our school?
I don't know if you want to go the FEMA route or not. Some of it's free money, but you end up spending 3 times as much for the same product. Has been my experience, and you want to talk with an architect.
It's right, and that's the process when we were,
If you wanted to talk about a safe room, which is basically provides the exact same means to an end, it gives you a safe room to gather, but it's not FEMA regulated.
I just had someone, you were bringing that, I had somebody ask me, why can't we build something like Monette out at our high school? Get the FEMA money and make it an auditorium like Monette's doing. I said, well, I don't think we qualify for FEMA money at our high school because of the population, because of the FEMA buildings.
well, you gotta have
storm
money
shelter.
that's, to begin with, you gotta have money that's released to specific counties. And I actually just had that conversation today with Brad Earl with Paragon Architect, who does a lot of FEMA buildings. And he said Lawrence County is not on the list right now. So if Lawrence County becomes on the list, then we can fill out the notice of interest and then move forward with some type of project at that point. But until your county's on the list to receive funding, going that route is not an option. But a safe room might be an option. It would certainly be much less expensive than FEMA, even though you get 75%. It's just as it said, that gives you a shell. There's nothing inside of it that's done. So by the time it usually ends up being about a 60-40 cost. We looked at that when we passed the bond in Crane 2 years ago, and to build a FEMA gym compared to a regular gym was going to cost us $1 million more to do it as a FEMA project. About a third.
All right, any more discussion? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Next is old business.
These board policies are on the old business, mainly because they've been on agendas before. It's been a while. This particular board policy, GCBDA, dealing with professional staff short-term leaves and absences. As stated in my notes on the recommendation sheet, I have not heard back from the MSBA editor on this, so I'm going to ask that we table that particular policy to October. The reason item B is on the list, if you remember, towards the end of last year, the board chose to move to a full-service maintenance agreement with MSBA. Part of that process was for MSBA to audit every single policy and procedure that we had in place. So a couple months ago, we were able to get all of that information back. Dr. Reedus and I spent a few hours going through all of the editor's notes and the attorney's notes, if it involved attorney with MSBA. The changes and recommendations to changes are in those board policies that I included in your packet. But other than that, everything was good to go. And so in order for us to get all the new policies updated online so that what's in our hard copies match what's online, they need for the board to do a formal adoption of all of our board policies, so that they will now all have the adoption date of September 15th, 2015. We had some policies that were adopted in 1999. That's how old some of them were that hadn't done anything with. Once we get this piece done, I'll call the editor tomorrow and they will get us a link taken care of, and so then everything online will be updated real time. When we do board policy updates and revisions a couple times a year, when you'll get 20 to 30 of them at a time, when the board approves and adopts those, I send them, I fill out a Word document online that has the adoption date, what the process, what the decision was by the board, and then boom, immediately it's updated online. And so we don't do anything manual anymore. The best thing is that anything that we want to change or adjust and put custom language for our policies, that doesn't happen until the editor looks at it. And so that keeps the district in much better standing with all the policies. So the board policy adoption for item B that I'm asking you to adopt would be all of the board policies with the exception of board policy GCBDA, because we're still waiting to hear on some of that language and we don't want to adopt it as is. Well, that's not my recommendation. Questions about that? I know I kind of went in a nutshell, those of you that weren't here last year, and I wasn't either, but the rest of the board. It's much better to have a full service plan because your policies are sound and everything's looked at by the MSBA attorneys.
Yeah, I think it's, I know Mark and I both have gone through it seems like all the time, these board policies. They're tweaking them or retweaking them, and so now it's kind of a relief to know they are getting
And so,
gone over.
and essentially, this is just the final process that the board needs to act on in order to have all of our policies up to date and live.
We adopt the current board policies. With the exception of, we need to remove GCBDA.
Right. Okay. Second. We got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed? All right. We'll come back. GCPD as soon as you hear.
Yeah, we'll have that in October. I wanted to bring a few projects to the board for your consideration and your thoughts that have come up. We have about $56,000 remaining in bond money. Now we have about $450,000 that has been set aside for the technology replacement in the high school. So besides that, we've got about $56,000 left. Some items that have been brought to my attention: the junior high school, the ovens in the kitchen at the junior high, from my understanding, are 29 to 30 years old. Dan is having to spend a lot of time continuously fixing those and working on them. I've got an initial quote from Debbie. She's waiting on a couple more, but that's about a $7,000 purchase for those double convection ovens. This is just something to mention. I just want to make sure we had some of this discussion at Robinson. Apparently there were 3 windows. Is that right, Mr. Mays? There are just the 3 in that adjoining hall there,
Yes.
up towards the
Transfer
front
on the
side,
main
yeah,
hall.
that didn't get replaced. A lot of windows got replaced in Robinson, so if there's not any opposition to that, we're going to go ahead and get those other 3 taken care of and use a little bit of that money. Dr. Pope, when we were talking about the ovens, indicated that she has a fairly substantial leak in the cafeteria of the roof in the junior high. We've not had a roof company come and look at that, but that is something that, unless there's opposition, I'd like to at least move forward to see what we're looking at cost-wise on that. And then something on a smaller scale, after we have our annual music inspection each year for our insurance, and one of the things that came back is we had some equipment, some playground equipment at Pate that needs to be taken care of, and Dan has gotten a quote on that from Miracle, which is the company with that equipment, and it's about $3,200. That might be too small of a project that you want to use bond money for. That's probably something we could easily accommodate within a building equipment budget or a maintenance equipment budget. Given that this is really the first meeting that I've been involved in with some potential bond projects, I wanted to throw some of those things out there. Definitely the windows at Robinson, unless there's opposition to that. I think if we're talking ovens, $7,000 thousand could be something that we could put into that as well. Not knowing what the roof situation is, not knowing how much that's gonna cost. Yes, sir.
We ever have any the roofs checked after that happened?
Dan said yes, that we did. So this is more than likely coming from some seam, those flat roofs. Could be from a seam, could be from flashing of the air conditioner, until we can kind of pinpoint. But as you know, with those flat roofs, they can be coming in one place, get on those beams, travel another place, and so, but this was the first that we had heard of this, so it's evidently fairly recent that this has started. So it may not be a major issue, it may be something that takes several thousand to fix, I don't know.
Are you talking about the leak here? I missed.
No, I'm talking about, it's a leak in the cafeteria at the junior high.
What about the
It's
leak
about the leak here.
Wasn't aware of that. A leak in the gym?
Well, they couldn't do the volleyball game the other night.
Yeah.
This week.
And if I had to go side.
Well, you could probably, there's probably leaks all over every building. It's just a matter of if we end up getting into roofs that have substantial damage. Now, one of the roofing companies that I've talked with recently, they had talked like they hadn't been that long that they've been down looking at the roof. So I don't know that we're gonna be dealing with an issue that is substantial cost, but more maybe some repair in certain areas. But when they're down to look at the junior high, we'll have to come over here and look at this one too.
Up the northeast corner of the junior high.
No, it would be the
I mean,
south,
southeast,
it would be
okay.
southwest.
So it's all the way over towards the football field.
Yes,
I know we had issues with the
Yes.
south.
yeah, it's over by the, well, it's the cafeteria, which is on the southwest side down there. Right,
Southeast
right
corner
in,
of the cafeteria, we had issues with.
oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know specifically the cafeteria where she was talking about, so.
Might be a good idea to have it looked at since we went through
Right.
manager.
Right. If there's not any opposition, I'll move forward with getting some specific pricing, and hopefully, we can come back with, a recommendation in October with, a couple of these, if not more, for the bond money.
So you wanna wait till October to?
Well, I don't need anything approved from me right now, because I don't have specifics on, other than,
When you gonna get bids and to?
Can I-
The ovens,
So it's up.
Are the ovens about, I mean, could we might need the ovens in a week? I mean, will they, you know, I'd hate to wait if.
they're on their last leg. She said that she had given me one bid today and said she's waiting on a couple more. The initial number I was given was 8,000 to 9,000, so right now the one she gave me was 7. So that's under what it was, but I mean, if that's gonna be an easier one to get bids on, whereas some of these other things might take a little bit longer. The playground equipment, he went right to the company who makes those, so that's not gonna vary. Really, the only thing it might vary on this potentially would be the roofs, and then until we get somebody else to look at it, we don't know. But,
I would think if we need the oven, so we go ahead and get that moving. I'd hate to be waiting.
Get to live a class for a month.
you guys need to vote on the bond projects?
I mean, are you asking what dollar range? I mean, I think something 5 to 10,000 bond money is appropriate for, I think the smaller items,
Okay.
just general expenditures.
I think it was set up to be an improvement to the schools, and if that's what we needed. That windows.
Right. The windows I'm gonna take care of. I just wanted to mention those. I mean, it's just 3, but I didn't feel comfortable just going and saying, okay, yes, I know we need to do this, but I didn't feel comfortable using bond money without the board's okay.
Yeah, I kind of, like I said, I feel that's kind of what it's designated for, is upgrades. So the ovens are in dire need, we better not wait till they Cool.
We'll get the playground equipment taken care of, but we won't take that out of bond money since it's a smaller amount. We've got equipment budgets to take care of that.
We have to replace or repairing or
There's some parts of it that need replaced.
So you modify what we had to make it appropriate.
Correct, yes, sir. Okay.
We should save us some more money.
Okay. Okay.
Some good ones.
Yes, sir. I've got clear direction. All right.
Okay. New business, item A is snow bin removal.
You've got two snow removal bids in your packet. Based on the bid that went out for a per hour rate for rubber tired backhoe, rubber tired loader, road grader, and labor for salt or snow melt application. Based on the two bids, my recommendation to the board would be to accept the bid from Kenny Singer Construction for the 2015-16 school year.
But we accept the low bidder.
Alright. Got a motion and a second to accept Kenny Singer Construction with a low bid. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
I abstain.
Let's hope we don't have to use it.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Usually when you're prepared 3 months in advance, you're in good shape. Okay, Mr. Rayford has a report for the board regarding mandatory random drug testing for students.
Okay, I've given you each a folder. There's a lot of information, so feel free to ask questions. I didn't give you every single document that I have. I kind of narrowed down to things I thought you guys might think were important. The one copy is the information that I've collected, the employee screening services. I spoke with her a couple different times. Basically what that is the 4-pound versus the 12-pound test. You guys can read to see the difference in cost and what it tests for. One of the things that she mentioned on the second page, they do about 200 schools, but she wanted to give me a list of comparables as far as school size, smaller, same, bigger, that type of thing. And then all the procedures that they use are the next couple pages. One of the things that she wanted me to clarify or make sure you guys understood is if we decided to do this, she would help us with the process, obviously. They give kids numbers instead of names. Some schools do that a little different, but she wanted me to mention that. So that's what that is. When Dr. Shaw had approached me about this, I had met with all the conference ADs, and that's the information that I've got, along with basically the information I've gotten was from our conference schools, the school that I had just previously worked at, and then some of you guys that were on the board back in 2005, we came across all that information. So I'm sure some of that will ring a bell. Were you on at that time, 2005? Were you on too? Okay, so I've got some interesting information about that. Basically, the conference schools, you can see the ones that are doing the testing right now, the ones that are not. When I talked to them, some of the things I wanted to know from their schools was cost, who they were testing, whether it's junior high, high school, both, and that type of thing. So you can kind of see what I had done with East Newton, Carl Junction, Cassville, and Lamar. I put those schools down because the other schools, everything was so similar, I didn't want to be redundant on that. And if you guys read through it and have questions, feel free to ask as we go. And I do have their policies with me as well that I didn't include just because it would have been way too much, but I do have their stuff with me as well. Some of the things that kind of stood out to me when looking through their policies, and I kind of itemized that with Lamar, some of the things that they're doing. Of course, they included in their content was their VOTEC kids as well, and students who drive. They were the only policies that I looked through that tested those kids. They did not have performance-enhancing drugs on theirs like some of the others did, and their consequences were a little bit different. And I figure if this is something that you guys want to pursue, we can talk about some of the language down the road. But they do have citizenship standards that they put in there, counseling type things that they do, and you can ask those questions if you want when we're finished as far as what some of these other schools are doing. East Newton, one of the things they put in there was it was in season and off season. They did include performance enhancing drugs, and one of the things that Shannon had explained to me was they do several schools with the steroids. They don't do it every time because it's costly. It's anywhere from $60 to $80 a test to do that. So they just kind of randomly, and she's basically the way she explained it to me was they put it in their language under reasonable suspicion. So I don't know if that's something we talk about down the road. Carl Junction was really similar to East Newton. They had a few things a little different. And then the previous district, you can see who we tested, how we did that. We did do staff at that point. Of course, it's a voluntary deal with teachers on that. Back in 2005, the information I did find, a letter was sent home. I did bring that. Back in October, they sent that home to every kid that had a kid participating grades 7 through 12, and they had an open forum session with that. Didn't have a great turnout from what I've read through this thing. I went through all the documents and kind of narrowed it down to the things I thought you guys would think is important. They basically, when it was presented to you guys that were on the board, their policies looked exactly like the other 4 policies I have with me. They did their consequences a little bit different, and we can go through that here in a little bit. But that was exactly the same as what I've gotten from all the conference schools. And I'm sure that it was probably Jim Wagner that collected that back then. But some of the things that stood out on that was they were going to do grades 10, 11, and 12, and then let grades 7, 8, and 9 decide if they were going to participate in something, and then they would be added to the pool. That was a little bit different than the other policies that I had looked at. The violations were different. They were set up to where, and I can go through their stuff, but it was set up to where it was a counseling type deal. You could get counseling, and you could divide your punishment in half, or you could be suspended for a third of the season. And again, I've got that with me if you want me to go over that. What I did is I broke down, they had done a survey, the ones that had voted yes for the policy. Some of the things that they were concerned about was they felt like steroids needed to be added to the test back then. There was no counseling for positives when found, so I guess they weren't at that point, weren't to that point of talking about what they were going to do as far as kids getting counseling. They thought all the grades should be tested, and a lot of policies have, they're concerned about prescription drugs being identified when they do these tests, and I guess when that was presented, that wasn't something that was added to the policy that they showed to the board at that time. They wanted testing for alcohol, and they wanted to bring back the DARE program, which we have done currently. So the ones that voted no, they had quite a few concerns, some interesting ones. They felt like all the students should be tested. If students were caught under influence under our policies at school, that they're suspended. Why would they not be after drug testing? They felt like students in clubs should not be punished because of what they do on the weekends. At that time, they thought there was not enough evidence of a drug problem in our extracurricular activities to institute a policy. If all students are not subjected to random testing, then you're not solving the problem. One patron went as far as say, I pay taxes in the community, I have responsibility for raising my children, and the school has responsibility to educate. One parent said if we're doing students who participate, then we should do the coaches and instructors as well. One says a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and we're teaching kids that they're guilty until proven innocent. I'm just giving you some of the negatives here. They also thought that steroids needed to be tested if they went through with the policy. And apparently, I don't know, you guys might be able to answer a question, they were upset that the school board wasn't at this meeting. So I don't know if Dr. Schlegel at that time, I don't know how that worked, but that was one of the comments that was listed on that thing. There's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a lot of different forms, a lot of different ways to, if you guys have questions for me, I've talked to all the ADs in the conference. Monette is kind of in the same theory that are thinking that we are at this point. I think they're wanting to start it as well. I know I talked to Rob today, our trainer, and he said that he spoke to them, and they've already visited with Cox Health about drug testing over there as well. The only one I didn't get any feedback really from was McDonald County. They don't do it now, but they didn't act like they were anytime soon pursuing it either. So you guys have any questions, I mean, I know you have a lot of information, but I'll be happy to answer anything you guys have, concerns, questions. I've been at schools that have done it, I've been at schools that haven't.
Do you have any concerns from
You know, I-
schools you come from?
No, and I asked her that on the phone, I said, so, starting off, what were some things that, she said it's the initial startup. She said, once they're in place, she hasn't encountered a whole lot of negatives with it, and she does 200 schools. So, it comes down to how many you want to test, who you want to test, how often you want to test. Some are doing it every 2 weeks, some are doing just high school, some are doing junior high and high school. And it just depends what kind of panel, if you want I think you say Carl Junction, well, you've seen the list of some of them are headed towards the 12 panel that are on the 4 panel now. I think that's on that second sheet. You guys were there back 10 years ago. There was some interesting, they did a pretty good job of collecting some research. I was glad we came across this, Mr. Culture actually came across it. There was some letters sent to the superintendent at that time. One of the ladies just didn't think that there was an issue with drugs. She thought it was more alcohol related.
A lot of things have changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah,
And
that's
there was a
right.
I remember when it very first came out, several years ago, there was a lot of people about equal right or, type of deal, privacy, schools should be able to test.
She stated that in her letter about the Supreme Court ruling and the Fourth Amendment. She thought at that time that there wasn't enough parent community support for the testing. And this particular lady wasn't saying just no, but she just didn't think it was, she thought there needed to be more programs in place before they started jumping right into a drug testing policy. She said there was a lot of misconception that alcohol would be tested and the coaches and teachers would be tested. She just said there was a lot of misunderstanding at that time. But there was some interesting, like I said, the survey I thought was good. It wasn't a great turnout for the open forum, but they put some time in, I think. There's some schools, as I mentioned, that have a little harsher punishment. One of the things that was presented to you guys back then, I thought was interesting, was like the first offense was the student shall have the option of submitting to a drug counseling program and then be retested in 2 to 4 weeks. And if that test came back negative, then there was no penalty assessed. If that student objected to that, then they went to the second offense, which was, half the season, remainder of the season type stuff. And there's just a lot of language in this stuff that schools are doing a little bit different. Just depends how you guys would want to pursue or set it up. But I haven't had a lot of negative from the other athletic directors in the conference, I'll tell you. They think it's good, they like it. It's just a matter of how you want to go about it and spend, and who you want to test, and what you want to test for. They thought, one of the things that was mentioned back then was that it would cause animosity between our teachers, administration, and kids. I asked her that question. She said she has not seen any of that with the schools that she works with. But she works with a company too, so. Everybody uses the company that I put in your folder. That's what the 200, in Southwest Missouri, and she did it quite a bit, so. You guys have any questions about anybody's policies that come to mind as far as concerns? Like I said, I've got everybody's. I've read them a bunch.
Do you have a favorite?
I don't know if I have a favorite. I know there's some things that you can pull out of each one to make it work for our district. I do think that it needs to be, we're not trying to catch you, we're trying to deter it. And I think that's, the counseling thing. The only thing on the counseling that these schools are doing, like Lamar, the cost is on the family. And so sometimes, they jump right to the second offense because they can't afford counseling. So there's some negatives in each one of them. I think if it's something that we decide to do, we need to make sure that we're not trying to catch it, we're trying to help. And that lady that was against it, she said she did say if we saved one kid, then it would be worth it. So she wasn't completely against it, but that's how she felt about that. But you guys have all been here a lot longer than I have in this community, and I don't know the perception of it, but
Well, any kind of change, and then somebody's kid gets selected to
Yeah.
test,
right.
that's an issue.
I asked her about the, the teachers and coaches and things of that nature, because the district I came from, my name was in the pool, I got pulled 3 times. I thought it's just something we did, and we had teachers that didn't do it because they were on prescription meds and didn't want that. There's reasons for it, but, one of the things she said is she just feels like if the schools that are doing that, it just sends a better message to our kids, that, the teachers and, coaches and sponsors and, so that's one take on it. Another district I've been at, it was just the clubs and the extracurricular, and
Isn't it all probably strictly confidential until there's a problem?
Yeah.
And there has to be. So a teacher, if they had documented,
right, and that's what would
that would
happen.
never get past that point.
Right.
Is that true?
Yeah, and I asked her about that too, and she said, they don't list the prescriptions that they're on because of HIPAA reasons and things of that
Right.
nature, but they do communicate with them. Same thing because one of the things that was listed back then was a kid getting, showing a positive result that maybe has asthma and is on some type of, that stuff's all so much better now than it was 10 years ago. Test R2, so.
I was trying to just go through here, what's the most common, the 4 or the 12 panel? Kind of
Well,
seems evenly split.
I think for what you're getting, I looked at that too. It's something I was gonna talk to our resource officer about too, as far as things that he sees on the streets a lot. In my opinion, for the extra money, you probably better do the 12 panel, I think, but, and again, it comes down to, she told me, I just read my notes, like Joplin's testing 20, of course, it's a larger district. Carl Junction's, you see what they're testing each week, every 2 weeks, and, the district I just came from, it's once a month. So it's just a matter of how many you want to test and how often you want to test them.
That was my next question. Is that number then purely up to us to decide? It's not based on
Yeah, it's based on the
enrollment or
district.
anything? It's
No,
just,
just the district, yeah.
What's the added charge for the enhancement drugs, the steroids?
She
and
said
things like that? I don't
that's
see
$60
it.
to $80 per test for
Per
steroids.
test.
And she does
For
have
each?
districts doing, yeah.
Type of, there's multiple,
I don't know if I asked her that question, as far as steroids, different types, you
just
mean?
gonna throw all of them in.
I think so.
Anabolic and all the different ones that
Yeah,
they're out
I
there.
think that's what's so
But not human growth.
Yeah, right. And I
I don't think you test for it.
And I think, she said that the ones that are doing it now, they'll skip a rotation. They may not do it each month, they'll do it every other month or every 2 months because of the expense of it, so.
it's just once you enforce or establish that fear factor, there's always the luck of the draw,
Yeah.
if you're doing it.
Did you
Well,
ask any of the conferences?
I'm sorry?
Did you ask any of the conferences, what they have to budget ballpark a year?
Overall?
Yeah, for
No,
a year.
I didn't. And that would've been a good question to ask, I didn't. I guess it'll vary just because of the frequency and the amount of kids, but,
Right.
It's interesting to see how some of the schools have handled their first offenses and second and so forth, and then who doesn't have the performance enhancing drugs. And
Did they tie the consequences to the same as their tobacco and alcohol?
you mean like school policy as far as?
Yeah,
the
school
way they do-
pol- I know it used to with us, if you had tobacco offense, you were suspended a game, and then second offense, it was 10% or, 10% of the season.
Some of them had like
30%, a third of the
season.
season and stuff. And then I think we kind of lightened up a little bit. We went, kind of did a district or conference survey, and they kind of lightened those consequences up. Would you tie it to something like that? I mean,
I think you could. and I
sure wouldn't want it to be lighter.
No. Again, I think, and again, you guys know more than I would about that as far as what you'd want to do on consequences if you're setting it up. What we had at my previous school was, if a kid got suspended or got tested positive, then he or she was out for the 28 days until the next test or whatever it was. But they could, if they were out for, let's say, half the season or a third of the season, they could cut the punishment in half by seeking counseling. As long as we had proof that they went to a drug rehab counseling type deal, and that cut the punishment in half. There's lots of ways to set it up, and that's like I said, there's so much information that, A lot of it's the same too. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between everybody's policies. They've obviously shared them through the years, but,
If a student tests positive, do they retest immediately?
some of them had another, like a different type of test that they would take.
Just to make sure it's accurate?
Yeah, and then some didn't.
So it didn't have those false positives.
Yeah.
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 I think in here it said they would, if it tripped it immediately, then it went to a lab
You did.
to be validated. But as soon as they pee in it, or whatever, right there on the spot.
That same test?
That will tell them yea or nay.
Like Carl
If it
Junction,
trips something, then they would take it to the lab to validate it.
Carl Junction's pretty proactive, he mentioned that they do the dipstick test for 15. If it's positive, it goes to the lab, that costs them 35. Because they're doing a 12 panel, and they do the oral swab as well. So they're pretty thorough on theirs. They're doing 15 high school and 5 junior high every 2 weeks, so they're spending quite a bit of money.
Yeah, they're doing 20 a week,
Yeah,
or every 2 weeks.
yeah.
Can't beat that. That stays with you 3 months.
East Newton was pretty harsh on some of their they were a little more strict on some of their consequences.
That's why they only got 20 kids out there.
Could be. One of the things that you run into, that I ran into as well, is how to establish, do we make these kids turn these forms in before the activities start? Do we have deadlines? Do we have an appeals process if a kid decides they want to come out for a sport after the fact? I mean, we had an appeals process. Some of these districts have said, if you don't have your form turned in by August 28th, then you're not playing or you're not participating in anything. What we had them do at Gainesville is when they filled out the form, they checked every club that they thought they were going to be in and every sport they thought they were going to be in, so we already had a heads up on that. And if they joined something else, it didn't really matter, but, so that's something that was kind of a pain, because we did have kids that just didn't get the forms in on time, and so they'd have to meet with the committee, and so anyway. But there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think it's going to be in the presentation of how we go about it as a group here, if that's something you guys decide to move forward with.
Has any of these schools you talked to, did any of them mention that they had any kind of legal issues or anything?
No, I asked them at the very first AD meeting, if not. And the way you set that up, and me and Mr. Culture talked a little bit about it. They pull the names, the numbers, they send them to the school. You have a designated person here on staff that takes care of that, and takes care of them at the site until they go into there to get tested. Gives them water, that type of thing. So there's a process to it. It takes a little bit of time. It's not a quick process each time. It's something that would take us most of the morning to do. We were doing 5 high schoolers and 2 junior high and 2 or 3 staff. I can't remember. And then bus drivers. So.
Do most of the other districts do all students or just students?
That's the call I was going to make today, because I should have asked her the last time I talked to her, and I didn't get a chance. I don't know. That's something I need to ask her about. I don't know the answer to that. That was hit on heavily back 10 years ago. They thought all the students should, they thought that pinpointing a certain group like this was a negative thing. But and one of the things that was mentioned too was the kids or the groups that we're going to be pinpointing aren't the kids that are ones that we need to be worried about. It's the ones that aren't in activities, and I've heard that for years.
So what's a turnaround on this? I mean, say we approved it tonight, would we be something we could implement a month from now or a few weeks from now? Are we talking next?
I think the earliest
Second semester.
a second semester deal.
Okay, then my next question, then I know Grant kind of touched on it, but all of our, the punishments, are they all set now in our handbooks?
For
If we went to this, are we gonna have to readjust some of
I
the
think
verbiage?
I think we'd have to readjust it and make it to where we want it for our district.
Is that a pain, a big deal?
I don't think so, not with everything I've got,
Okay.
not really. And like I said, 75%, maybe more, is the same in all these policies. It's just what's different is the timelines that we give kids who we're gonna test is pretty much the same in every conference school, which was extracurricular, co-curricular, and clubs. And then, but the offenses were different,
Right.
you know, and so, you know, it's just you wanna set it up towards more of a counseling for first offense, or if you wanna, just depends how we wanna set that up. That would be the biggest pain, I think, out of all of this, is the consequences.
Yeah. I didn't know.
And the amount of kids you wanna test at this high school, I don't know, you know, I'm talking 300 kids, where I came from, as opposed to 650, so, you know.
Who you want in the pool, when you want them in the pool, how many you gonna test, how often you want to test?
I just was curious if that's something we were like geared for next August, or.
And I think one of the things you'll hear probably, and I don't know how often this happens, and she mentioned this on the phone too, we ran across it, actually happened to me too. You know, I got pulled 2 or 3 times in a row, you know, and then kids start to think, why am I being, you know, this happens. You know, I can't imagine it would be as likely here with this big enrollment, but I guess it could.
Would there be any way to test every kid one time up front, and then do random after that, or would that be way too much of an expense?
2 times, how many hundred, 600?
That's if we're just doing the high school. I mean,
It's 12,000.
We've got a problem outside of the high school.
650 kids, that's 14 grand.
You know, I can tell you, just in the little time that I've been here, as far as working with the alternative school quite a bit and stuff, it's not just a high school issue, I'll tell you. You know, but I mean, you know, we are starting to dare back up. Was that 5th and 7th grade?
5th and 6th.
5th and 6th? Okay, I don't know why I thought it was junior too. 5th and 6th. So I don't know, you know, I don't know how.
Well, when I said every kid, I'm for just tests and the extracurricular kids. Just me
So
personally.
you're saying not clubs, not co-curricular, just athletics?
Band, drum, I mean, any extracurricular activity, not
Okay.
every.
So it's co-curricular.
Okay, so the club, yeah. Yeah, it can be set
If
up.
you add in the NFFA, I think you're probably taking in 500.
I'm just sitting there thinking, you're probably taking in 75%,
Right.
and that 25%, you know, that's, if you're talking random testing on another 150 kids, you're not really, I mean, we can set a budget. We can just say, here's how much money we want to spend, and that's gonna tell us how much,
And that's what a lot of schools do.
that's gonna tell us how much our testing is gonna be, how often and how many. And whether you're testing 5 a month or 20 a month, is the deterrent any different? You know, a long time ago, I found out that my wife is just as happy with 1 rose as she is a dozen. I've been buying a dozen for a long time before I found that out, so, you know, that's kind of the same.
Buying your
A dozen,
Secret.
12 times, more often.
They're cheaper, buying about a dozen than just give her one a month.
Reason.
What does any of the board, want him to do any more research on something or questions?
Does that need action? I'd like to authorize Mr. Bradford to develop a draft policy.
I mean,
Well, he probably needs a little guidance on.
Yeah, the part that I guess I would want the guidance would be the consequences, you know, first, second, third. I mean, not that you have to give me everything, but if you want to set up more towards, you know.
I think counseling should be the first step. I honestly do. I mean, you can have counseling with a little bit of a whip, but I think the major part of the first step should be, let's make them better. I mean, what is it in the workplace? In most workplaces, if you get caught, well,
There's a lot of them that are.
Ours is termination.
No.
ours is too.
would work for the railroad, you won't be terminated. About 3 or 4 times through rehab.
You have to go through a pre-employment drug screen, and then you're put into the random.
Mine has always been termination too, but if you get out into the manufacturing workplaces and stuff, you see it a little differently.
You want it once a month?
Do what, what'd you add?
You thinking once a month?
A random monthly test,
One time a month?
where it could be on the 31st and the 2nd, 31st of one month, and 2nd of the next month, a random day.
Yep.
It's just
Is it
random.
gonna be based on
It
a
has-
percentage of our pool?
As far as how many we do?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
and
because
that was
you do
actually-
once a month, you don't wanna just pull 5
Right.
out of 150, you wanna have a percentage
And
based
I
on.
think what they had done even 10 years ago is they had all the numbers of who's in participating in clubs and athletics, and they had all the numbers, and we could do that, yeah. Could do that.
I'd be interested to see the entire population as opposed to the people who are involved in an
You mean
activity.
The people that are involved. as
Yeah,
well as
see
the large.
what the difference in those numbers are. It's not much, I just assume,
Mhm.
until the whole population.
And I like testing the junior high level too.
I do too.
I do
I'll
too.
be honest with you.
Board
I do
feels,
too.
I'd go to
Maybe
fifth,
not
sixth
as
grade.
many, but as long as we're down there testing, like I said, that fears.
Yeah.
Have everybody in the pool, yes. Because I think we're talking about 100, extra 100 people maybe.
How do you punish them?
Oh, they're gonna have,
Sports people, you take them out, they miss
I
their
don't think that
season.
should be the only, I don't think that being out of your extracurricular activity
If
should.
somebody tests positive for a drug in their urine, they're under the influence, so they're attending school under the influence.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got things in place, but I don't think just banning them from the extracurricular activity is enough of a, I mean, I don't think that's what this is really intended for, is it?
No, it's not supposed, no, not if you're gonna get support from the community, I don't think. I think it's gotta be more a deterrent, yeah. And, yeah,
Where are the conferences, are they all doing the whole population, or?
no, they're not.
You'd have a
Not
small percentage.
I'd like to
that
see
would be
the,
the whole
and I,
population.
Yeah.
no, I just think as of our finances in general, I know it's bad to be that way, but I'd really like to see what the difference of cost to do
I didn't say I
extracurricular
wanted to do
compared
them,
to
I just want to see
the
what the number is. What's the number that we had of this whole, and then how many do we have that are involved in extracurricular? You probably,
What percent are not doing any co or extracurricular, is that what you're
I
asking?
think it'd be interesting for us just to know that anyway. How many of our young people are actually involved in a,
Are you guys comfortable with, some of these, including the policy I had before was, when they sign their forms at the beginning, if they are not willing to be tested, that means they are not able to participate in activities.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
anybody that moves in late, or we just gonna,
That's
is
what-
that gonna be a mandated, okay, to participate, you got to test?
They had transfers in there.
test in.
Yeah, move-ins, they had a 2-week window there, and they went into the pool. Somehow it was worded with a 2-week deal, and they were thrown in, yeah.
Well, I personally would like a little bit more time to go through everything that you get.
If you guys want the other schools' policies, like I brought them, you're more than welcome to take them. I didn't make copies for everybody, it's just, but they're all, like I said, there's a lot of the same, but
Yeah.
there's just a few things in there that I think we could make work for us if you guys want to.
Ultimately, for me, I mean, we talk about the obvious ones, and of course, the obvious one, and the ones you hear in the news, are this star athlete that's suspended, and then everyone's in an uproar. And that's a small part of it, but, when we talk about kids showing up under the influence at school, especially if they drive to school,
Well, that's just it.
it's a safety issue.
Mhm.
Drugs are a huge problem at the junior high, and, junior high and high school kids, they're of the size that they can be a safety issue to other students and teachers
Mhm.
as well.
Right.
And so to protect our staff and to protect our other kids, I'd like to see us include, the entire population and not just single out, specifics. I completely come from the standpoint that I hope we deter some kids from doing this. Punishment or catching someone is not the objective. It's
To get the kids who
safety of our other
don't do it yet,
students and
to
of
give
our
them a
staff
reason
are
to say no.
primary.
I have not personally been at a school that's tested the drivers that drive to school, but I know a lot of districts are headed that way as well.
We do have a drug policy, right? Already in place?
Yes.
Someone who tests as positive, they would fall under those guidelines, would they not? If they tested positive at school?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're an athlete or not.
Right. And that was the case that we wanted, in her letter, she was saying that, you know, if the kid gets caught with drugs right now or whatever, they're automatically suspended from school for how many ever days, but in the policy that was presented to you guys was they were gonna get some counseling. They wanted it to, some wanted it to be more stricter, some, you know, didn't. So I do think the counseling, and it did, I'll just tell you, it worked for us, the previous district, we had several kids that did get the counseling, and I think it made a difference, you know, at least for a while. I don't know if it stayed with them or not, but it worked for a while, and
What kind of counseling do they get? I mean, where at?
it's just supposed to be a register, I mean, there's a counselor that is a drug rehab
Just
counselor.
drug
certified.
rehab.
Yeah.
And who?
And I don't know if we have any local or not, I mean.
Yeah.
Parents pay for it?
I don't think we're supposed to refer, I think they're just supposed to seek it and pay, yeah, the parents pay for it, the guardians pay for it.
I thought you said it was.
They do it right there by Hal's Chinese restaurant. It's one of them.
Yeah, I'm all for you then, maybe putting something a little bit more.
Is it something you guys are wanting to do second semester, or you guys want to move pretty quick with it? I'll call her and see what other steps we would need to do then, and do that as well.
I mean, I can't, my thought on it is if we're gonna do the whole, you know, student body, then we probably wanna test a higher percentage. Of course, the more kids in the pool, the less odds we get pulled. If we broke it down and just co-curricular, extracurricular, not as many we think, but we'll, like Mark said, I'd be anxious to see those numbers.
So are we saying that we would set a budget of some sort, or cap it at that, or?
Well,
I'd rather do 5% of our total population than 10% of the athletes and people that are in some kind of activity. And I still think you got to deter it.
yeah.
I'm throwing a number out there.
So basically, we're looking at what, $22?
Per month.
Yeah, if you guys decide the 12 panel.
5% is gonna cost you $10,000.
5% of the entire seventh grade
Cost
through high
10,000.
school.
Roughly 45 kids, $22 a test, 10 months.
About right. Pretty good.
And if you say the teacher getting assaulted or getting in an accident.
Those
Are
teachers.
we gonna include the teachers in this?
Yeah, I think so.
What was the last comment, I'm sorry?
Teachers and everything, I think that ought to be I think if you're gonna get a buy-in,
And that's obviously a voluntary, and that, I brought that to the consent form we use for teachers as well. You know, they can either check, yes, I want to participate, or no, I don't. Most of the teachers that I had in the previous district were in the pool.
school board members, throw them in there too.
Test away.
Bring it back.
The cholesterol is terrible. Quit eating pizza. Just like
Rest assured that if I have a job, I can just.
Do any of you guys want to look at any of the other school district stuff?
I
You
do
guys,
have a job.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to have a little bit of direction, I guess, what we're all kind of looking for. I didn't want you to do a lot of work and to bring something back, and then us want something completely different. But I think everybody's wanting junior high and high school.
Okay.
I think everybody's wanting the whole student body and teachers, well, or all administrators, I guess. So would that include non-certified, certified bus drivers?
buses are already,
They're already,
we use this company.
so they would just be exempt from this one. Yeah.
So my question on the consequences, if the consequence for an athlete is they lose a third of their season, and a consequence for somebody who's not involved in anything, what do they lose?
There's where you're gonna get attorneys involved, probably.
Well, again, don't we have drug policy, enforce the drug policy,
See,
athletes can't, they can't, perform while they're
That was my
suspended.
question a while ago, what's the ones that are not?
I don't know how I've never heard of a school district testing every kid.
Not many of them.
They just don't do it.
That's what
They test kids that are in extracurricular, co-curricular clubs, drivers, and you put all those in a group, you usually get about 80% of your kids. But I've never heard of a district doing all their kids because the punishments or the consequences in place are losing the privilege of participating in those activities that they're in.
Right, and I get that, but I have a trouble.
I'm not disagreeing with
I know.
testing all
If you're
kids.
suspended from school, you
I'm
can't
just saying-
participate either.
Right.
I mean, if
I
you get
understand
suspended
that.
for drug use.
But if a kid tests positive for marijuana, that stays in their system more than just that morning. It could have been 10 days ago. They're not under the influence if they smoked marijuana 10 days ago. It's in their bloodstream.
But we
It's in
ran
their-
drug dogs through the school and brought kids out for hits and went to their cars too. That's checking 100%.
Right, which that's possession, because they've got it. But my devil's advocate, what I'm saying here is, if it's different if a kid comes to school under the influence or is in possession or tries to distribute something, than if they test positive on a urine test that they smoked 10 days ago. It's a complete difference. That person could be completely 100% fine that day, but they test positive because of something 10 days ago.
It's gonna be, I tell you
That's
what, our
my-
marijuana laws are gonna be a mess
That's
anyway.
where I'm.
We already got a mess going on there, so.
So basically, the
With
kid
employment.
the kid must smoke marijuana and not get in any trouble for it, he just doesn't play any sports and rides the bus.
Or in a year, he gets a prescription.
If we have a drug problem, I have zero opposition to testing every kid, but you have to have consistency in your consequences. And I don't know how you have consistency in your consequences if you don't have anything to take away from that particular kid.
I have a question about the testing. You said once there's a positive on the dipstick, it's sent off.
Some districts do that, yes.
Okay, so when it's sent off, my experience with drug testing is when it's sent off, they actually do the actual number of like how many milligrams are in your system. So say if a kid smoked pot 10 days ago but came to school and he was fine, it would say he had like 1 milligram. And then on the results of the test, it's going to show you he probably did this within 24 hours. He probably did this 10 days ago. So it's going to give you an actual number of the drug that's in the system. Does that make sense?
And that makes complete sense. I still go back to the point. You're kicking a kid out of 10 games of a basketball season because they test positive for marijuana, and this kid tests positive for marijuana. What are you kicking them out of if they're not involved in anything? What's the point of testing them if there isn't going to be a consistent discipline for each of those kids? That's my point. I'm not opposed to it. I think it's great.
Well, it looks like you kick him out of school then, because you don't have that.
You're going to
first
suspend the
tier.
kid. Then are you going to suspend that other kid from school?
Well, he's playing an extracurricular that we're paying for him to play in.
I think you have to suspend them both. The athletes,
No.
they can't perform while they're suspended.
But that's just like Mark said, if they got caught right now, the first repercussion is out of that sport.
And if the consequence that you want to be in place is that if they test positive for something they did on a weekend, you're going to suspend them from school, then you can be consistent with that.
all these other conferences is just extracurricular activity, right?
Yeah. Extra co and then you got your clubs.
May I think, I don't know for sure, but I think the reason for that, I think this has been ruled on, that suspicionless drug testing of all students actually violates their rights, if that makes sense. Like, unless they participate in an activity, and that puts them in the pool that I agreed that I would play that activity and that I would be drug tested at the same time. And so suspicionless drug testing of all students, I think, hasn't it been ruled on?
They have to sign a consent form for the testing in order to perform the extracurricular. They don't have to sign a consent form to come to school.
I don't know that. That's how I always understood it before, but that's the reason it's not been school-wide.
It says in the Earl's case, there was a student named Earl who didn't participate in sports. but that she was in band or non-athletic extracurricular activities. It said the court ruled that they could test in those cases, but otherwise, unless they were participating, they couldn't be tested.
Okay.
That's what I
I
thought.
can understand that. They have to sign that agreement to participate.
Right. And once they
The student doesn't
do,
have to sign that agreement
Exactly.
to be tested.
you are
Just to
infringing
show
on
up.
their rights, just, yeah, because they have a free education. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
No problem.
So we're saying grades 7 through 12. Extra and co-curricular. Anything else in there?
How much do you want to spend? How much do you want to spend?
We're gonna do the 12 panel?
I think if you're gonna do it, you need to do the
Yeah.
12 panel. There's not that much difference in cost and.
For what you get.
And the prescriptions are.
And the
big
pill
an
issue is,
yeah.
Prescriptions are a huge issue.
Once we know our numbers, we can get an idea.
And you
Give
guys
us
felt
some
comfortable, you
options.
could build a good plan based on the information.
I think so.
Yeah.
What you're seeing from other districts and what they're doing.
Did you find out from a few of the other schools what they budget?
Yeah, I can find out. Got any of
And I
that?
know with Carl Junction, they test a lot more, but they got a lot bigger budget.
Well, you can take all these numbers that he has listed.
Kind of figure it out.
Figure it out.
Or the districts that are size. Like, cynically kind of
I didn't realize so many did it.
200, she said. And she did say they waived the initial startup fee because we use our bus drivers. That wasn't a big cost there. I don't know what that is.
So that's where you sent that same company?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of different companies?
You know, I was curious about that too, but everybody went back to this one. I think it's in different locations in the state. I think in Southwest Missouri, that's the one.
I'd like for, if any way possible, to not get out of here. I know this is open session. To not get out of here that we're looking at doing it the second semester. I'd like for them to know that it could be next week.
Is that gonna be on, that's gonna be on.
This will be posted on the internet.
Yeah,
However,
I don't
we're
think-
an hour and a half, or about an hour and 10 minutes into it, so
People will be tuned out.
They'll turn it off by then.
Well, you know what, we're wanting to deter, really, we want, it'd be great for some kid to say, hey, they're gonna start doing that second semester and never use it. That'd be wonderful. Won't have to, because they're all bulletproof and they're never gonna get caught.
Okay. So we're talking, what kind of time frame do you want to have? Maybe have something drawn up. I mean, talking, what is this, October? So,
Next meeting?
At least November, if we're gonna do it January, at least.
Yeah.
yeah.
You can swing that one.
Do you want, are you wanting us to come up with the consequences, or is that something that we'll all, I mean, I can bring you a lot of different options there and just plug that stuff in too.
I'd really like to see what follow course on some of these other schools. It
Okay.
seems to be working. There's not a lot of problems or
Yeah.
issues. I mean, the easier we can implement it and just take right on off, the better for everybody.
Yeah,
If
be
we have
okay
to
with you
change
guys.
something, that's fine, but, you know, if we can tweak something a little bit.
Okay.
But shouldn't we just let them
Yeah.
do
Yeah, I
that?
think
That's what I
ultimately,
mean.
we're gonna lean on you guys. I mean, you're the policy experts.
You know what's gonna be best to get the punishment that's needed.
They're gonna approve policy, you're gonna enforce policy. So it's gotta be something that you're comfortable with being able to enforce from the high school level. I'm gonna be able to support from central office.
Okay. So get numbers on how many kids we got involved in things, and then we'll see how many we want to test.
Yeah,
But we're saying once a month,
yeah.
once a month.
Junior high, high school.
Okay.
So when you say once a month, so if someone goes once and tests positive, will we retest, give them a chance to retest in 2 weeks, or are they out for a whole month?
I guess we'll just have to go through all of
Just
this.
set a number, like that's what we have on Mount Hope, you just set a number, 10 random tests, you know your budget's gonna be, and that could be in 2 weeks, it could be in 3 weeks, it could be in a month, I mean, you spread them out that way.
She's gonna send 5, what she would do is, for example, she'll send 5 names and 5 alternates. So if that kid that gets pulled, the top 5's not there, then you go to the first alternate, and so forth.
If a kid, let's say either a boy plays football or a girl plays volleyball, that's all they do, are they in the pool all year?
And I do
So
think,
if they are caught with drugs at the end of their season, the consequences would go, or at the end of the year, the consequences would turn over to the first part of the next season?
one of the policies is like that, where it, yeah,
It
where it goes
carries
into-
over.
Mhm.
I'm seeing different ways, like he said, when you fill out the form that you're in the pool the whole year if you're in track, and that's only you do in the pool. The other ways I've seen it done is you're in the pool once your season starts, you know, so if you're in football, you're in football all year long. And then if you're just a basketball player, that wouldn't, I mean, there's different ways to do that to get kids in the pool. And Gainesville probably the
So do you have
better
to,
way to do
you
it.
have to fill out a new form each year?
Yeah, every year.
So that
To me,
punishment would carry
I
over
feel
then?
like the easiest way to do it and monitor it is we have at registration, we give them out, they have to have them in by a deadline, and then, we can figure out what we do with those kids that maybe miss the deadline, I mean, we can, some of them say you missed the deadline, you're out. Some say there's an appeals process where you meet with the administration and explain why and all that kind of stuff, but, it does make it a lot easier to get all those forms on file, because, if we're doing clubs and stuff, it just makes it a lot easier, because that stuff starts right away. But, and the other thing too is one thing we did not have at Gainesville was, off-season, like in summer. And some of these had off-season and in-season.
But you said it'd carry over to the next season. Why would you do
So
that?
like if in December a football player got caught, then the penalty was a third of your season, then he's gonna miss the first 3 or 4 games
Yes.
next year.
Or you set that up to where he's, if he goes to another sport, and that's this, it would be his next sport up.
So if I'm a football coach, I'm saying you better go out for baseball.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Please go out for a spring sport.
I would
You
just
better
like it to
run
be a high
track.
enough percentage
You're throwing
of
the
tests
shot
that
this year, buddy.
Are you guys, so are we talking like, when we include this language, are we gonna say performance enhancing drugs? I guess my thing about it, and I'll talk to her some more about it, was she said when schools include that is that they're putting it under their reasonable suspicion paragraph. And I've got all that, and I can show you guys that too, but again, that's pretty costly.
You said some schools test over the summer as well?
No, but
Okay.
they're enforcing it, like if the
Season waits.
Yes.
During dead week.
Yeah.
It's not working. It's not working. That's true. I didn't even know. I'd have worn my good shirt. I'd have worn my 2X shirt. Okay. So I guess you have direction to go.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all the information. man. I'll go home and sleep. Where are we at? In school suspension teacher.
Yep, again, Mr. Raker.
This is actually a 7 through 12 deal as well. I would like to add an in-school suspension teacher for a lot of reasons, but we spend a huge amount of time on attendance and parties and things of that nature. We're already to the point now where 80% of our discipline's coming from that area, and in the past, kids have just been kicked out of school once they get to a certain point. I'm trying to avoid that. I've had to be pretty creative on some kids already. Our policy on tardies is, first and second tardies, they're getting warnings, and then on the third, we're starting detentions. But once they get built up to 4 or 5, we're talking extended detentions on Thursdays and Saturday schools. And then we're talking about kids that don't attend those, so they go to OSS. And I'm trying to One of the things I implemented at Gainesville was with the in-school suspension. If a kid missed an after-school detention, they did their in-school suspension at school, which means they were there, they were getting instruction, they were still having teachable moments. We weren't just sending them home and kicking them out. On top of that, when we send a kid home, we get so much per day per kid, and the numbers on kids going OSS for these reasons is pretty high. Rhonda and I spend a huge amount of time on, we have sheets of kids. I mean, we've got kids right now that have consequences all the way to Halloween already, and it's early. And I can't tell you the exact reason why we're having a tardy issue or they're not getting here on time to school. We're working on it. We've got teachers walking kids to class. I mean, it's just crazy. Out of the 203 occurrences we have, I think 157 of them are dealing with tardies or attendance. And so I guess what I'm asking is if we could have, the other thing is when we do an extended detention or Saturday school, that punishment's not happening until, and I don't want to do away with those things because I think those are good consequences. I'm just talking about adding another alternative for kicking kids out of school. When they're extended detention or Saturday school, they're not eligible to participate until those consequences are served. So if I get a kid that comes to school the next day after not serving, they get their consequence done the next day here at school in an alternative setting, and we move on. And right now, if we have a kid that gets sent out of class for a disruption or whatever it may be, we have nowhere to send them. They spend time in the conference room, and I understand why we want kids in class. I get that. And it's just right now, I've started a little deal with ISS where I send maybe one over to alternative school because we're full over in all schools. So, and it's already working. I had a girl today that did not want to go back to that ISS room, and she's been on time for about 2 weeks, but she's already at her limit. So if it's working, it's worked before. I know that ISS was here until about 2009 or 10, something like that. I looked at the handbooks today, and I know it was cut because of budget reasons. And I don't even think we have to have it. I'd like to have it full time, but if we only have it a couple days a week, I still think it would be effective. I just hate sending kids to OSS for those reasons. It's just I've sat down and done plans with some of these kids where they've got 10 tardies already, so they're in 5 Saturday schools and all these extended detentions, and it's just going to get out of hand quick. So I'm asking, and there's other reasons to use ISS. I mean, I'm still going to use Saturday school and extended detention for more severe punishments and things of that nature, but I think if ISS is set up right, those kids eat there, I think it could be a good deterrent, but we do have some people that would be interested in doing that, I think. It just depends if you guys allow us to implement it. I have seen it work. It does work with attendance and tardies for sure. And, we spend...
Right about the teachers too, right?
Well, that's the
Those
thing. I mean,
disruptive kids out of there.
one good thing about ISS, if we have a disruptive kid, that's where they go, maybe just for that hour even. But it's nice for a teacher to be able to walk down to the ISS room and check on a kid's progress, maybe on their prep hour, instead of having, when a kid's OSS, obviously not being supervised, they're not being taught. And, I know Rhonda's taking this stuff home at times and getting caught up on it as well, and our office aides are working hours upon hours getting the stuff put in. I know Dr. Pope uses ISS over in her office. That's not ideal. So
That's happening school-wide, I believe, right, Dave? I mean, ISS wasn't stopped here because it wasn't effective and it wasn't working. It was stopped because of budget reasons, and it should have been reinstated whenever the budget allowed at all levels, not just your level.
Yeah. I think it works.
What level did we have it?
Third, fourth, or no, one for third and fourth, one for fifth and sixth, one for junior high, and
There was, there was one page and then 3-6, we shared one as a building.
you guys had one for the whole building. Okay. And that's possible. I mean, that's really doable still.
Yeah.
But we've got kids sitting in principals' offices all over the school building.
I've been at Dr. Pope's office to take her some paperwork.
I've had secretaries tell me that they're trying to have personal conversations, and there's kids sitting there, and you've got parents coming in, having personal conversations with a somewhat ISS student in their office.
Well, in the way that I would like to run it is when those kids get here in the morning, they don't go and to the commons area, they get their breakfast, they eat breakfast down there, they eat lunch down there. They have restrooms down there. They're just completely removed from their socialization until they get their punishment done, and it works, it gets kids here on time, it just does. And it's tough right now with how
Do you
many.
get people interested, I mean, you have, who would take their spot? I mean, how's that?
Well, my thought initially, and again, we were talking about maybe trying to find somebody that was retired, or, just starting out, that
We
type
used
of thing.
pairs
Just-
before.
Huh?
We used aides before, and some of my own Mike
Mhm.
Dobbins was in your building
Greg Parks?
for a while. We didn't have certified staff doing that.
So what's on the agenda, is that a request for a single position to fill 7 through 12?
7 through 12. Yeah, we would bring seventh grader or seventh and eighth over here as well. Mhm. For just, for school suspension. Because we have room to do that. Not sure they do it.
What kind of a, what kind of a cost are we looking at?
It depends on,
I mean, just a non-certified.
it's not an easy job, it's not a fun job. You gotta have the right person in place to make it effective. I don't know that just paying them a fair salary is gonna get the right kind of applicants. I don't know that it's necessary to have a certified position. So, I mean, it could be something to where it's actually a salaried position and here's what we're gonna pay, or an hourly position, but it not be on a particular salary schedule. Base teachers, almost 34, a para is probably about 14 maybe. I was thinking somewhere in the middle, if we can get interested around $25,000 with benefits, you're talking closer to 35 by the time you pay all the benefits. But
So would they be evaluated and all that? They would have to show something.
But because if certification wasn't required,
Right.
they wouldn't necessarily be considered an exempt employee, so they would be an at-will employee.
Right.
And, to me, that's a starting point, unless we want to, try to find a certified person for that. But districts do it different everywhere.
I'm not for throwing money away or anything, but would this be a time to consider reinstating more than just that one?
So you had 7 through, did you have one separate at the middle school before, and one separate at the high school, and one at the elementary, is that what it used to be? Or?
I think we had 4.
There were 4 total.
Well, 7, we'll cover 1, 7 through 12.
I don't know.
ISS teacher for proof.
She's smiling.
They never used theirs.
I have students up in my office, but I try to transition them back to class as quickly as I can, and it's not for the consensus of what they would have them for. I would not need one. I'd like the option, maybe if I had a student that maybe I could transfer to David's building.
Well, that is an
Yeah,
option.
that's what they did at the district that I was at last. That's what they were doing.
How many do you average a day or a week in your office?
It is difficult to say. I mean, I've got some behavior disorder children that I have up there quite a bit. But, 1 to 2 a day for a couple hours, and then I try and get them back to class.
What do you think we're losing on funding here?
Losing?
Yeah, to balance out if we pay a 35,000 compared to.
You lose $35 a day for every kid that you suspend. So I don't know what the suspension numbers are over the course of a year that could have been replaced by in-school suspension, but you're certainly going to offset
Some of
some
that,
cost.
that's what I was,
Plus, get closer to our 90%
Well,
goals.
exactly. Not only are you offsetting some of that cost, but it increases your attendance, which also then helps your APR. So, I mean, there's several benefits to having it. I understand at the time it was needed to be cut, but in a district our size with the type of population that we have, I mean, it's you know, when he brought it up to me, I said, put a proposal together, because the budget can certainly support an ISS teacher. I would be a little hesitant to add 4 ISS teachers.
Let's add 2.
and I agree with what you're saying, it's gotta be the right one,
Yeah.
we're not doing it
Right.
good, we don't
We'll
need
do it
a
right.
glorified babysitter, we
Right.
need somebody that's, and I like the alternative, but if we could do the shock and awe, that sounds good to me.
Let's add 2, 1 for 7 and up and 1 for 6 and down, that can be used by every building, intermediate, elementary, and paid. And then
Do we know the numbers down there? Is it same?
they're kind of ugly at times, I think.
Is that gonna be hard though to get kids moved around like that, at that lower age?
None over there, they're all in the same building.
Okay.
It's not
But
paid.
at paid, it'd be up to.
I got a transportation director right here.
Transportation director is there. She can transport
I'm
anybody she
just
wants.
asking, it's a question.
You just added a bus to your benefit package, Mikey?
Yes.
Just driving around in a bus for 8 hours.
We got a couple companies in bus, right? We got a van and a.
I drive a bus a little way to Florida.
SRO.
We had an SRO.
Yeah, we got,
Use them a lot for that already.
Mr. Swadley, absolutely.
He's a good transporter.
A couple of times having Mr. Swadley transport you from building to building.
That's what we're doing right now. That's what he's doing for me right now.
And I think it would take one time.
One time, and then that kid's good.
Police car goes.
Can we go 43?
What do you want to pay them?
Can we cut?
I mean, three is gonna cost you $100,000.
I'd rather do this.
I think 2 will get you covered, and if we find out that the numbers are so much greater than what we think they are, that doesn't, then let's leave ourselves open to.
Kevin, do you have any of your suspension from last year, any of those numbers at all?
Not on top of my head, I don't. We tried not to, that was our last resort, was to suspend, but we did. There was a few kids that just, nothing worked, and just to get that off the plate.
We're 1 month in and we're at 13. And that's with me coming up with other plans to not do this. Like I've sat down with kids and said, okay, you got Saturday school these 3 Saturdays, you got extended detention on Thursday, these Thursdays. You got we actually form a plan so that I don't have to take them to school.
So you have 13 is up to, did you say Halloween?
Oh, I've got kids that have consequences all the way up to that, and I've limited them because I've done these plans for them. See, if they start serving, we're a month in. That's the way our
So
tardy
if you
policy
took-
is though too, that's part of it, and that could be part of it too, but it's.
That'd be $400 a day,
Time we
right?
spend, time,
At 13, you're talking $400 and some dollars a day, correct?
yeah, I mean, if that's where we'd be at right now.
Yeah. So 2,000 a week, so that would almost cover.
Right, well, and I haven't kicked a lot of kids out for this attendance with tardies, this is, because like I said, I've got solutions to it, but they stopped last year in March and it was so bad. And the time I'm spending on this, I'd like to be in the classroom more, to be honest with you. If I have ISS, then I could be in the classroom more. I'm spending a lot of time doing this, which then is part of it sometimes, but I think this could be a good solution to it.
Well, I guess the question is then what kind of salary we with the.
Do you want them on an aide salary? Do you want them on a teacher salary? Do you want a salary just thrown out there? And they're not on a salary schedule at all?
Either first or last, in my opinion.
Your idea of somebody, is that somebody already in the school district? Or-
Well, we had a guy that was retired as a Dr. Stevens. You can call him, okay. He's expressed interest. He's expressed interest. We've had a few others that have expressed some interest too. One is just getting out of college, wants to be a coach and wants to teach. And so he
Of course, a retired person would only be able to do 550
Right,
hours.
and I talked to him about that, which, I don't know if that'd come out to, if that would be 3 days a week or not, but
Probably two.
two.
They're not actually gonna be developing lesson plans, but they're gonna be implementing lesson plans from the other teachers that developed to try to keep them up.
They're gonna have to be able to help the kids with work that they have with them.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a little different. Again, I think, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, we paid 8 salaries before. I'm pretty sure they were all they're all 8s. I know Mike was, and he was.
Mr. Minders, Coach Minders wasn't. Coach Minders was paid on teachers'
Never let him
salaries.
sit there.
Norris had, right, said,
And Coach, yeah,
and Minders.
Norris and Minders. It's been since Loretta, since we paid 8.
Because that would get you.
What if you get two of them, you'd have to have two, what if you get two of them to do here?
Lance is too
Two
high.
here, yeah, they split. And then that might be good either.
Two different people doing it though,
Okay.
because you're gonna have, there's gonna be differences in that classroom. And the more consistency you can have in that classroom, the better it's gonna be for those kids.
And honestly, I'm for giving people full-time jobs instead of giving people who are retired.
So what do you do?
So we need to come see you first thing in the
Just
morning.
like in a situation when they're sick, you have a second to do that?
Or you don't have ISS that day.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen it done both ways. If you have a competent, good sub within that room, I've seen it done that way. But I've also seen it where they put somebody in there that wasn't. It's a disaster.
Oh, I can see that.
Do we need find that personnel or something? Do we need 5 days a week?
Breakfast,
Okay.
guy left.
I did too, but I didn't hear him say that. I couldn't really see that 2 days a week.
No.
Not in
Let's
this
just, throw a number out there, yeah, I've been back, I want to put plus benefits.
I think it needs, we would.
That'd be 2,000 a month.
I don't think it needs to require a certified person, and because it doesn't require certification, I think you can go in the middle and pay a couple thousand a month at 24,000. You could advertise it that. If you don't get the interest, then you have to revisit it, and you may have to advertise it as a certified staff.
Do you think it needs to be somebody who can teach a class?
Mark Gillespie.
You're gonna have such a variety.
At the high school.
That's the one that was Norris, best.
Yeah, we had certified people at the high school.
The high school,
Supervisors,
yeah.
all
Paid.
those work, so.
Peyton Elementary. Yeah, they were teachers more like a semi-old high school.
You pay if there's a certified teacher ought to be employed somewhere.
Right, that's why I'm saying that, I mean, 24 is still 10 grand away from what we pay our brand new certified teachers. I just don't, I mean, I just don't think, it's a much harder job than a classroom. Because you're dealing with tough kids all day long, in a room,
By yourself?
by yourself, it's, so I think you've gotta compensate that. That's just my opinion.
We don't have to designate salary right now to hire, but we do have to have a salary to be able to advertise, which I think that's
What do our
salary
parents
are too.
I should know that.
14.
Depends on the,
So 24 work.
Plus benefits, which equals 35,000.
Special person.
Yeah, I'm for that. The 24 that you mentioned earlier with the
Yeah, that's still gonna be none.
10,000 benefit, yeah.
You'll have the same benefits as a full-time person.
I think you'll get some more.
Move to hire two.
Gotta make a motion to do this?
Haven't made a motion for
I'll make a motion to hire two.
I second that.
Third.
The 24 and the 10,000.
Not the first time. I've been too slow.
Loretta Jones was before.
Two positions.
She was awesome.
Yeah, we've had some really good, some that made differences in kids' lives.
Okay.
Facilities at Robinson.
We want lots.
Need them, we won't need them at Robinson,
Lots.
they're bringing them over here.
No, but
Oh,
they still have.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, they got lots over.
I was thinking that as a junior high. Yeah,
6, 8 rooms.
yeah, they got a bunch of empties.
Make a motion in
They
a
got a
second.
bunch of desks.
Okay. So we got a motion second then to create 2 positions for ISS. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we're gonna make a motion to set salary on the 2 positions.
I'll make a motion for the 24,000 plus benefits, full benefits.
I'll second it.
Pause.
Should let you have it.
No.
Good. Okay, motion and second, all those in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item B, paraprofessional.
Well, while we're on the topic of money,
Or lack of.
in the years past, the calendar has been different than what it was this year in regards to the number of days contracted for staff as well as how snow days were made up. This year's calendar, we have 174 days in the calendar, and any snow days that we miss, we make those up. So certified staff is 177 days, and the majority of our pairs are set to be 176. They come in on the Monday and Tuesday, not Wednesday, but our tile pairs come in on Wednesday, so they're 177. What I have discovered within the budget is that the numbers that have been used in the past, based on those calendars, did not get adjusted to match where we are this year with our pairs. So what that means is, all of our pairs have been paid in the past, and it's budgeted to be paid for 180 days and 7 hours a day. The problem with that is that the majority of our sped pairs are only going to work 176 days, and our title pairs are only going to work 177 days, and none of them are going to work 35 hours a week because they work past once kids are gone on Fridays. So they work around 32 and a half hours, in that range. So what this means is that we're in a situation that payday was the first day today of the new year, but we've got around over 90 hours that our pairs are being paid for, but they're not actually going to work. And do not at all feel right about going to the pairs and saying, here's a mistake that was made and it wasn't adjusted and you weren't informed of this back in March, and taking anything away from it. That's not at all what I'm bringing up. It is important to know that we're talking about $30,000 that we will be paying to these positions, that if something isn't adjusted for the rest of the year, we will pay over $30,000 for those salaries and not get hours from them. So what I would like to do in the current situation where we are right now would be we're not going to be able to make up days that they're not going to be able to work, but after talking with the principals, they all felt like there definitely would be things that our pairs could do on Friday afternoons, whether it be supervised students that are there, that are teachers' kids, whether it be work doing different things for different teachers. That in itself would make up about 2/3 of the hours that we will be paying. And then the other third of the hours, in my opinion, we can't do anything with. If we find then by doing that over the course of this year that it was valued and we definitely needed those pairs to be here on Friday afternoons, then we adjust those things in the spring, gearing up for the next year. But at that point, we obviously have to adjust the number of days because we can't continue to pay for the number of days when they're not working. If we find that it's not valued and the time on Friday isn't a good use of that time, then we have to adjust that. And again, those conversations with our paras take place in March and say, this is the way this next calendar will be, and they'll still make, with a raise, more money per hour than they did. They just won't have as many days that they're working. They won't have as many hours that they're working. And so, to me, I think I don't want to take money away from anybody at this point in the game because I don't think that's right. It should have got adjusted back in February, March when the budget was put together, and it didn't. It was an oversight, and it's now that we're finding this out. But I think it's right, or if we're going to pay people, that then it should be expected that they work for the hours that they're being paid. And so I don't think asking them to work 2.5 hours on a Friday afternoon from this point on is out of the question. But that's why I'm bringing it up to the board, and if there's opposition to that and you don't want that to take place and you want it to be left as is, then, like I said, it's about 90 plus hours per employee that we would be paying that they wouldn't actually be performing duties.
They have the opportunity to opt out of that and just take that as a deduction.
Well,
from the pay.
I mean,
They don't wanna do the
that's an
check.
option. With the first payroll going out today, that would then be readjusted over 11 months, which means that would even be less money per month because you're only taking away from 11, not 12, so it's not spread out as much. So, I mean, that's an option.
I was just thinking about that one person who scheduled a counseling session every Friday afternoon at 1
Well,
o'clock.
certainly, and-
Had something that they scheduled.
And it wouldn't be
for that.
something that we would require. It would be what I would like for them to do, but if they say there's absolutely no way I can, then I think at that point, that conversation needs to look like, well, I understand that, but if that's a case, then there will be X number of hours per every Friday that we will adjust that. By asking them to just work on Friday afternoons, it simplifies that whole payroll process tremendously. But it's not impossible to adjust that if we needed to. Just trying to make, I think, maybe the best scenario out of a situation that is unfortunate, that should have, like I said, gotten adjusted back in March once the calendar was set, but it didn't.
So if they work, we pay them, and if they don't, we adjust, correct?
My opinion is we pay them exactly what they're expected to get paid.
If they work.
Right, now, if somebody chooses and says, I can't, there's no way I can do it on Fridays, then I think at that point we say, okay, we understand that, but we're gonna need to deduct that. Just because we're asking everybody else
Right.
to work for
Yeah.
that. I don't think it would be right to say, okay, if you can't, that's fine, we'll still pay you anyway. I don't think that's
I agree.
consistent. But
Well, I just know that when we had the girls, they had like 18 different counseling sessions with, DFS and all
Sure.
that stuff that was going on, and Friday afternoon ended up being.
absolutely, and
Won't
when you
work.
don't expect to have to be there,
Yeah.
and that's where I don't wanna just say, sorry, you're not getting paid for this, because they're all expecting a particular paycheck, because they know the raises they got, and they know what their pay has been based on. And with hourly employees, they're paid the amount of hours that they work, and so, to me, this is a decent compromise to the situation.
What's that?
I don't need a motion on
No,
this,
you don't.
I just wanted to bring the situation to the board. If there's opposition to it, please speak up. If there's something you're thinking about that I'm not, please speak up. But I've talked with Dr. Lakin about this and Dr. Reedus, and we feel like this is the most equitable way to handle the situation without taking money away from anybody, which I don't want to do. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, you. Okay. AEA, anybody here? Anybody here with something to add?
I just have what Libby wrote. Libby's the president. She
You have to
was.
step over here, I'm sorry.
You gotta click on camera.
I just have, that's it, I'm getting a podium, and we're gonna put everybody up there. Just what Libby wrote, and that is in your board packet. I don't have anything to add. We have been meeting, the welfare committee has been in discussions with Dr. Shaw about the sick leave policy that was not acted upon tonight because we're still working on wording and things like that. He's sent that off, so that's one of the things that we're working on, and you guys will see it, I guess, next month, and that's about it. That's all I got.
Okay.
You got any questions or anything? Comments? Okay.
I guess so. Thank you.
Good. That was easy.
Have a good
Better what?
Have a good on camera.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, I wanted right there. Yeah. So next, food service.
Debbie's not
Debbie's
here
not here.
tonight, so.
Lance, speaking for her.
Nothing to add.
You got anything? No?
Unless you have a question.
Anybody got anything for Lance? I don't. Good job, Lance.
Did we figure out, Ross, you asked?
I've got a schedule that they've done, but haven't got a price from them yet. Grant brought by the stuff that you've gotten from True Green. I've not got a price from them.
Okay.
All right. Building principals. Dr. King?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Anybody got anything? We're all kind of quiet. Mr. Mace? Nothing to add. Nothing to add. Mr. Bax not here.
He showed up.
Oh,
not
okay,
here.
back there. Let me get my glasses
I
on.
watched some good volleyball games over
There he
there,
is.
so.
Okay. Mr.
Nothing to
Bax.
add.
Nothing to add. Sorry about that. I didn't see. Anybody? Nothing? Dr. Poe is not here.
In class tonight.
Or did she sneak in?
No, she has class.
Mr. Colton?
Nothing to add.
She's not here.
I did miss her. That's because we didn't have any hires tonight. She took the night off.
She's at Atari training.
Oh, yeah.
It's Atari.
She's normally here, or not.
Yeah, those ones, they don't do it.
Mr. Draper, you got anything? Miss Nash, anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Anybody got anything for? Dr. Lake's not here. Mr. Dr. Reedus?
One quick thing, we've got students in the junior high and high school who speak no English, very little English. We've been looking at, it's been a while since we've been in that situation. I think we have 7 students total overall that are in that situation, families that moved here just right before school. We did have a meeting earlier in the year, or earlier in the year, a couple weeks ago, to kind of try to figure out a plan for them. We do have ELL teachers that come in and out, but again, they need to have a translator. So what we're looking at is the possibility of a 4-hour part-time person to help with those students. I talked to a young lady, we posted it, and we talked to a young lady today about it. The way the situation would work, or the way that I would recommend the situation work, would be to use federal funds for that position. Instead of buying supplies or maybe spending quite as much with PD, look at it from that aspect of part-time so that we can pay it. It would fall within their guidelines of what we can do with that money. I don't see it being a continual position because, kids are pretty resilient, they learn fast, and they'll pick up that English and they'll be able to communicate, I would say probably before the year's over. But for right now, we're in a situation where we really need some assistance with translation and some of those other things. So that's not a position necessarily, part-time support staff that has to be approved, but at the same time, I wanted to let you know where we were looking at in case we can get that done.
Anybody have any questions? No?
I've got one real quick thing. Found out yesterday, talked with Ben, that we got notice from USAC that the E-rate funding has been approved. So if you remember a few months ago, he was here to get approval for the vendor to do the upgrade on the wireless. So that's a $111,000 project that our portion is only $32,000, which was budgeted for this year. So we've been waiting since end of June, and we finally got that. So we'll be able to start getting that upgrade throughout the district done, which will make a big difference in the wireless and how it works throughout the district. So, but that's all I've got.
All right, board members, got anything?
Where are we at on the front door?
Waiting for the proprietary locks and keys to come. Last name was under
Can't just go
Slagle.
to Ace Hardware anymore and get locks and keys.
I thought it was just a skeleton key.
Crazy.
We got a thank you card from Ruby Burnett thanking us, Aurora School Board faculty and staff. Thank you for the beautiful memorial steak in honor of my mom. Your thoughtfulness is deeply appreciated. Sincerely, Ruby Burnett. That's all. That's all I got. That's it. Nothing else? All right.
We have to have a adjourn.
We're adjourned now. But we got one more club.
Yes, we got